This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. Hey, it's James Taylor, and welcome to The Creative Life, a show where I talk with some of the most creative artists, entrepreneurs, writers, musicians, designers, and academics. In this episode, I talk with jazz violinist Nora Germain, and we talk about the idea of building your name and building your brand as an international artist today, how the changing the sands of the music industry have affected the younger generation of musicians that are coming through, and whether it's worth going to music college or not. Let's get into the episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm excited to have my guest today, Nora Germain. Nora is a Los Angeles-based jazz violinist and a fast-rising star on the international scene. After studying music at Idyllwild Arts Academy and the Thornton School of Music, she has gone on to work with some incredible names, including film composer John Altman, YouTube sensations Jacob Collier and Casey Abrams, pop star Sam Smith, and many, many more. She was named as a rising star of jazz violin by Downbeat Magazine last year, and this year, Nora will be releasing her fourth album and first inspirational book. So, Nora, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So tell us, what's going on in your world just now?
I guess in the immediate week, I'm wrapping up the final vocal recording session for my album. And I've also, just in this past week, sent my final rough copy of my book off to my editor. So that's very exciting. 2 nights ago, I found myself performing at Katy Perry's pre-Grammy party, which is a very interesting and fun crowd to be around. And today I'm here talking with you. So that's sort of been what's happening lately.
And how did you learn your craft as a violinist? Where did it all start from?
Well, I was born into a musical family. My parents were both violinists, and now they've retired, and my father is a luthier, so he repairs violins, and my mother is a violin teacher. But when I was born, they were still playing the violin, and so my mom decided to start a violin school around the time I was born with some other teacher friends of hers who were, I guess, maybe around my age or a little bit older when it started. So basically, I just grew up playing violin in her school, and there were teachers, my mom and some other friends of hers that would teach the kids, and it grew and grew, and now it has well over 100 violin students. And then I, around that time, I guess I was a teenager, so then I just sort of went off to school after that.
And where did the jazz thing come in? Because, I mean, you often hear with violinists, they'll go in either in the classical world or they may go into the world of doing the movies and different things. But jazz seems an unlikely path. So where did that come from?
Well, it wasn't actually something I chose. I sort of stumbled on it, and I went away to this boarding school called Idyllwild Arts Academy. It sounds very scary. I went away to boarding school, but actually it was a wonderful place to be. It's really, it's a very creative place. And so I went there, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to study until I met this man, Marshall Hawkins, who was a great bass player. He played with Donny Hathaway and Miles Davis and all these wonderful people. And he had been teaching there for a couple of decades, teaching jazz to the students there. And I didn't know that you could study jazz at that school. Obviously, nobody mentioned it to me because I play the violin, and that doesn't really seem very logical. But I sort of stumbled on his program, and I got to meet him, and we got along very well. And basically, from that moment forward, I had just been sort of thrown into this world of learning jazz through him. And I was about 16 then. And I just, it never let up. I love it more every day. So far, I hope it continues.
And it's interesting, having seen you walk into a jazz session where no one knows who you are. I saw this happen a couple of times in London. And so you're quite petite, and you go in, you go into a room, and for a start, even if it's a jazz session, you're playing jazz violin, which makes you stand out for a start, because a lot of jazz players don't think about the violin often,
Right.
and they maybe know one jazz violinist that they've actually kind of heard of. So what's fascinating is when I've seen you kind of go into a room and you can go in there and so people don't expect often much from you, and then you get up there and you just blow everyone off the stage, and it's actually quite funny in some ways to see that happen as well. So how have you learned to be confident enough in yourself and your abilities to kind of get up there with players that a lot older than you, maybe have big names in the industry already? Where did that come from?
Well, one place it came from was actually this teacher, Marshall Hawkins, because he was often throwing us into musical situations we weren't ready for. Like, for example, we would be doing concerts at school and the whole school is there, because we were in art school. So we all went to see each other's performances a lot. And, there's about 100 people there and it's complete silence. And he points to you and he says, play something. And it's like, okay, what am I going to do? And so he sort of threw us into these situations a lot. And one thing I learned from that is that so Marshall is much older. He's about 76 now, 75 or 76. And when I met him, I was 16. So one thing you learn in that kind of a context is that there's really no age in music, and whether people have 20 Grammy Awards or they have an EP they made in their mom's garage, it really doesn't matter. What matters is the music. So sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating. I've certainly been intimidated playing with certain people before, but if you can just remember that the music is the thing that matters and that music doesn't have an age, or it's not, being gifted at music or being a natural isn't about having money, fame, accolades, YouTube views. Like, that stuff is great to get if you can get it, but you have to remember what you're really all there for and try to not let it get away from you too much,
And that creative process of learning the violin and learning the kind of style that you play as well. I mean, you started playing when you were, was it 4? It was quite young, I seem to remember.
Yeah, I was 2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're 20, mid-20s now.
I'm 24, yeah.
24. So you've been doing kind of 20 years at this, which is they say it was 10 years to the 10,000 hours, 10 years anyway. So you had 2 lots of 10,000 hours. But then you did something very interesting. You're working on this new record that's about to come out, and you decided to release a book alongside as well. So and this is the first time you've ever published a book. So I'm interested to know your experience of doing something else creative, which you didn't have those 20 years of experience having done. And how did you kind of approach that? Were you able to kind of pull on anything that you'd learned from building up your kind of chops as a musician to use with writing?
Well, I was never really that great of a writer in college or high school. I mean, I could write okay, but one thing I really enjoy, if you haven't noticed, is talking. And so I came to the idea to write this book. It wasn't like, okay, I want to write a book. It wasn't that I wanted to write a book. It was that I wanted to get some of these stories from my life and some little bits of wisdom and other things that other people had passed to me. And I wanted to get it out to the world. I wanted to get it out to young people because I still feel very strongly that there are not enough young people inspiring each other. I think that we all look up to older musicians, maybe some that aren't with us anymore, but I think it's very rare to find young people who are willing to sort of come out of the woodwork and say, okay, look, we are all struggling. We all have a million questions about life. We all have a creative vision, a goal. And so what can we do to help one another achieve these creative visions, instead of us always being jealous of one another, or we are feeling very isolated, or maybe we're feeling sort of insecure and things. I wanted to come out with something that was like a statement to help other young people. And so I thought, well, how am I going to come out with this? I could do a YouTube video series. I could I could do like a weekly Facebook post or something. And then I realized once I had started writing down these ideas, I had these ideas about different challenges that you face. What if your parents think that you can't do it? What if you think you can't do it? What if you're doing something that's very rare? What if all these different things came to me? And I started writing them down on little Post-its, and I put them on a big whiteboard in my room. And I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I've got like 30 chapters worth of stuff here. And so I thought, well, maybe, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but maybe I have to just publish a book, because it just seemed like the most logical way to put it all together and then, bring it to people who are curious to learn something about me, and young people who would like a little bit of encouragement,
And did you said you're obviously you like speaking. So did you kind of speak something out into some recorder and then write it up? Did you go for that way? Or did you kind of go more old school where you kind of sat there, typing things out?
Well, the reason I mentioned the thing about speaking is that when I went to write most of this stuff, I wrote maybe 75% of the first rough draft in about a week or 10 days or something. I just sat down on my computer and I just opened up Microsoft Word, like this is just very bare bones here. And I just started to write like from the beginning until now. And then I, sort of added details to each chapter that make them a little bit more cohesive, so that each chapter sort of has an idea. Like this one's about nervousness, this one's about creativity, this one's about making money, this one's about whatever. But I just basically wrote as I speak. I wanted it to be very digestible, very simple, because sometimes when people are writing about these complicated subjects like, creativity, as you know, because, you're an expert in this stuff, it can get very complicated. And I didn't want to write something that was very complicated for people. I wanted to write in a style where people could hear my voice just talking to them like, look, you can do this.
Yeah.
You can achieve what you want to achieve,
And it's interesting. I've noticed that there's been a little bit of a trend in books recently where there's a lot of books coming out where they're dispensing with a lot of the really longer form stuff, and they're actually quite short books, and they're using either graphics with quotes within what they're trying to do. They're trying to show it in different ways. And it was an interview I was listening to just the other day with Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and has just got a great book out just now called Big Magic about creativity as well. And she said she'd been working on a book and she was like 80% there, like where you were talking about. And then what she decided to do was go away for a couple of days with a couple of girlfriends. And what she would do is she would actually speak to them the stories of what she was saying, or she would read them the parts of the book, and then they would write down what she was saying, and then she would take those words that they're actually kind of written out and take them away. And so what she found is that when she was reading what her girlfriends were reading back to her, was actually more her voice than what she'd actually written originally, because she kind of got caught up so much in writing in a certain type of way, and what she was trying to say was getting lost in the process.
Oh yeah, I definitely think it's important to really plan out what you're going to do, because if you don't really it's complicated. You have to see the big picture of it, but you can't get too far away from it where it just seems like this tiny little thing. You have to see how much work you have to do, and you have to plan it out. But like you said about Einstein, you can't get lost in it either. It's a very difficult balance.
Yeah, and so we were speaking just before we started about sometimes getting so close to the project you're working on. You've been working on this record and the book for what, about 2 years now? I think you've been the first inception of it anyway. Well,
it'll be like maybe a year and a half. So I started this crowdfunding campaign for it, I guess in June.
And this was the very first time you'd ever run a crowdfunding campaign as well. So there's lots of variables in this.
Oh yeah, definitely lots. Actually, one thing I will say is that I learned a lot from this whole process. I'm still learning, obviously, but one thing I wouldn't do is do two massive projects at once. I thought, oh, this is going to be so cool. I'm going to come out with a book and an album. People are going to love it. It's so interesting. But let me tell you, I don't know if I recommend that. I think it's great to do any number of different types of projects that you want to do. I don't think musicians should say, okay, well, all I'm ever going to do is go on tour and make albums. If you want to do something else, do something else, But maybe try to do it one thing at a time.
Not at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, maybe I'll come out of it and say, oh, this is the greatest idea ever. But I will just say, for those of you that are listening, you may want to just do one thing at a time.
And you were mentioning on this project, it was so all-encompassing that because you've had the album and the book that you've been working on, that you felt you were kind of getting lost in it. It was becoming very overwhelming to you.
Well, yeah, because there's so many steps. I mean, like, all in all, say, like, okay, shooting a book cover is one step, and then maybe hiring somebody to do the liner notes is another step, and then editing the liner notes is another step. If you look at the steps, I mean, there's probably thousands and thousands of steps all spread out throughout this, like, year and a half, something like that. And so, I mean, obviously, during all of this time, I still have to be teaching my students, playing my gigs, practicing, doing the things that we need to do to live. You know, you can't just, unfortunately, we don't live really in a time where many people are able to just sort of go underground and say, okay, now's my work period. Because then this whole thing would probably go by much faster. But
and it's funny whenever I've spoken to a number of very, very successful writers now, and they all say they would love that ability to be able to just go on an island for 6 months and write and things. Oh my God,
it would be amazing.
But is that it never happens. And these are very, very successful writers as well. But they just said it's just this is the nature of things as well. The
reason I think it's so tricky is that because you have to live your life, and I'm not married or I don't have any kids, so at least I've got some freedom, compared to some other people. But it's really hard because you have to live your life, do the things you have to do, go to your appointments. If you're a student, you have to go to your classes, whatever you're doing. And then whenever you have a free moment, an hour or two, maybe you have a weekend, whatever you have to be in the creative mode at that time because you don't want to waste any time. And if you don't feel like being creative, you feel like, eating lasagna on the couch, then your project is never going to get done. So you have to have a lot of discipline and say, okay, I've got 2 hours right now. What can I do right now? Can I edit this chapter? Can I practice? Can I do something that will go towards finishing this project? So it's been a learning experience for me in terms of just how to have discipline,
And I think Mark Zuckerberg's sister said something the other day. She put a post up, and it was saying something like health, family, lots of friends, building a business, and then there was maybe 2 others, and she just said, choose 3. Because she said you have to, everyone says, like you were saying earlier, you can do anything you want, but you have to, when you're maybe focusing on a particular something, whether it's in your health or other things, some other things maybe have to be deprioritized for a little while anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one thing I always mention, I'm not sure where I came across this, but people always say, well, you can't have it all. And it's like, well, you can have it all. The question is whether you can do it all. I think that's the big question. And, maybe there are a few people who figured it out. Beyonce might be one of them. I don't know. But it's definitely not easy to prioritize your creative projects every day. I mean, you want to do it, but it does take some inner strength, that's for sure. And
then you mentioned Beyonce. Then before we can talk about some of the insights you've had as a creative person, you actually decided to record this new record in New Orleans, and I noticed so that's something you share with Beyonce. Because I noticed that with the new tracks you just put out, she did that in New Orleans. In fact, it's an artist I know, Big Frida, who sang on it as well. So. When we think of New Orleans, and I'm actually going to be there, I'm going there this Wednesday as well, this week. And when I think about New Orleans, I think about jazz. So what was it like going there as a jazz artist to record this album?
Well, it was great. I loved it. Actually, Beyonce's sister was in the studio that we were in the day after we left, which is kind of funny. But I love it. I recorded at this studio called The Parlor, which is a new studio, and everybody who's anybody has recorded there so far. It's been just a revolving door of amazing people. And I love the city. I love the food. And I knew on this album that I wanted to have a slightly different flavor to what I was already doing. So it's still a jazz album, but I wrote some original songs and I'm singing on it and stuff. And I wanted to get some New Orleans musicians on it. So I thought, well, I have to go down there and play with them. And that was a wonderful experience. I love the way they play. I mean, there's no place like New Orleans. The audiences are just, I got to play a couple times when I was there while I was recording, just out with some friends. And I'm just astonished. In LA, they don't really show up to see you. And in New York, they show up to see you, but they'll kind of make you feel bad. And in London, they show up to see you and they make you feel good, but they don't really say anything. The audiences are a little bit
reserved.
Yeah, in my opinion. But in New Orleans, like, they show up, they make you feel good, and they're yelling and they're clapping and they're jumping up and down, and it's so exciting to play for them because you really feel like you're a part of that, and they want you to be there, and they love what you're playing, and so I hope I get to go back very soon. Yeah, great place to play.
And tell us about a time in your life where you've maybe worked on a project and you've given it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it just hasn't worked out like you'd hoped. And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Well, let's see here. I've had some album ideas. I've had some video ideas that didn't work out. And usually the reason it doesn't work out, if I've had an idea and it doesn't quite happen, it's usually a timing thing. Like, I want to do it before something else is in place that needs to be in place, or the people that I want to work with aren't available when I want them to be. And so usually I think another reason why creative projects, I think, sometimes take longer than you think they should, and you need to allow for extra time, is that the timing has to be right. You don't want to rush anything. And sometimes if you come at something and you have a lot of enthusiasm, it can be very heartbreaking and frustrating when you can't do it exactly when you want to. But if you can be patient, which is something I struggle with, but if you can be patient and let sort of the forces that be come in place first, then I think things can work out. You just have to give it some time, Yeah.
And on this creative journey that you've had, have there been times where you've had, the light bulbs gone on and you've had some kind of insights that you've said, okay, Nora, this is what you need to be doing just now. This is the path you need to be going, or this is the kind of decision you need to be making. Have there been any of those insights in your life?
Absolutely. I get them all the time. I had one in New Orleans and I had one yesterday. In New Orleans, I actually wrote about this moment in my book, but I was there. The bass player that I used for my album, Roland Guerin, he's a wonderful jazz bass player who lives in New Orleans. He was doing a show at Snug Harbor, which is one of the iconic jazz venues in New Orleans, with this singer called Philip Manuel. And he said, would you like to come up and play? Roland invited me, and I said, okay, great. So I went to the venue. I brought my violin. I met this guy, Philip. I'd never met him before. And he said, well, I'd love to have you up. When do you want to come up? And I said, okay, maybe the second set. He said, great. I'll just turn it over to you. I'll just sit and watch you from the audience. And I said, well, I mean, that's very generous of you, but you've never even heard me before. How do you know that I'm not going to totally mess up your show and make you look like an idiot, And he said, listen, honey, I don't have any insecurities, not even one. And so I thought, this is really something. This guy trusts me. Actually, he doesn't even care if he trusts me. The point is that nothing I can do can rub off on him in a bad way because he's not worried about that. And so he made me feel, and obviously then, of course, I had no insecurities. I'm like, well, if this guy isn't worried, I'm not worried. Screw it. But he just made me realize that if you are getting embarrassed by somebody else or you're worried about somebody else, it's just because you have your own insecurity. You have something within yourself that makes you feel inadequate or whatever, and somebody else is bringing that out of you. But if you feel just fine no matter what happens, then, you're not really waiting for people to impress you or make you look good, or, you don't really need that. And so I got this amazing dose of, do your thing. Nobody cares. It'll be great. And it was just such a wonderful, natural thing. And of course, we started playing and it was great. And then he had to come up and join us because it was so good, which was a lot of fun. But that was definitely an aha moment. I thought, okay, well, everybody who performs needs to not have any insecurities, Because if we're all waiting for the person next to us to make us look good, then, nobody can play that way. If you can just let go, then it's wide open,
And how do you deal with those times in your life where you're working on, a creative idea and you're trying to figure it out, but you kind of maybe get stuck in a rut, you're blocked in some way, you can't kind of work out the best way to fix, or maybe you just, you kind of get up and you just don't feel particularly motivated to create something that day or to work on that book or work on that thing.
Yes.
What's your little coping mechanisms for that?
Yes, that ever familiar feeling. Throughout my life, I think I've had a few inspirations to call on, like albums, books, movies. There's a few that I really enjoy. One of them is Keep On Keepin' On, which was a Quincy Jones movie about the great trumpet player Clark Terry. There's another one called The Zen of Bennett, which is a movie about Tony Bennett. And there's different albums and things. I've got a whole list of things sort of in my mind that really, really inspire me, and they sort of remind me why I'm doing what I'm doing. So when I'm feeling a little bit kind of like I don't really care about this stupid jazz thing anymore, and who really wants to play the violin anyway, and all this stuff creeps in, I usually go back to one of my original inspirations. And I find maybe it's been a little bit too long since I've listened to a good Stefan Grappelli album, or maybe it's been a little bit too long since I've read something really profound by Wynton Marsalis, or whatever. So I sort of call on that stuff, and I just give myself an hour or so to sort of delve into that. And I usually find it works really well. And I sort of reignite that thing that was in me when I first started on this path, And
how important for you is also being part of a creative community of other people that are doing either music or doing other things? I know you share an apartment with other musicians as well. So in LA, because you think sometimes LA can be quite a cold place in terms of maybe difficult to kind of get into different scenes because things are maybe spread out a little bit more than maybe some other cities. So what role does having a kind of a community around you of other people that are doing similar kind of work to you?
Well, I think it's extremely important. I mean, especially in a place like LA where everything's going to entertainment and Hollywood, and I was in that world a couple of nights ago, and it's not like that's the worst thing ever, but, it's harder and harder to find genuine artists in LA, I think, because a lot of them go elsewhere, and things in LA are very commercial, like you said, and things are spread out. So I definitely think having a community is extremely important. That was one of the reasons I wrote this book, is because, we need to share our successes and our insights with one another, instead of hoping that maybe somebody who's 85 will tell us something useful. A lot of my friends are traveling just like me, and they're doing things for the first time just like me. And, my roommates were just telling me this story about how they were shooting a music video, and they had a camera in the left hand and a light in the right hand, and they're trying to shoot with the camera while in the right hand holding this light because they didn't have a crew, and they're doing these music videos on their own. And so I think, if we can share that stuff with one another, it's extremely beneficial to everyone. So, yeah, get a clan together, go hear other people that you admire, connect with them, go see shows. I think the more you can connect with other people who you admire and who inspire you, I think the stronger your sense of possibility and capability is.
I'm so glad you're also writing this book, for that reason of it's so easy to compare our back shop to other people's front shop. So
what do you mean by that?
Well, so when you see someone up on stage, you just see the front of what's going on. You don't actually see all the stuff, all the the BS that's maybe happened in the background, and this flight has been delayed, and all that kind of all the other stuff that kind of goes on. And it's often quite hard. And this is also for authors, when maybe an author is they're seeing another author is kind of coming out with a book and it's being lauded, but they don't see all the days of pain and misery that's maybe gone into that. And so it is very important to share not just the happy stories of success, but also sometimes the struggles of what you've gone through. And so it sounds like this book that you've written, it's going to help a lot of those folks that are just kind of coming into the scene as well, where they maybe see the Wynton Marsalis and they see these artists up there, and YouTube stars, but they think, well, what goes on in my life doesn't seem to compare to what's going on there.
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, definitely. There are a lot of books that have inspired me. You said that there's some the creative books that are a little bit shorter, and I've read some of those too, and some longer autobiographies of some very accomplished musicians and artists and people. But I just feel like it's very easy to say, oh, yeah, of course you struggled, but then you became this. And so it still isn't really all that inspiring. I mean, it can be, but I think I just find myself when I was reading this stuff, written by people who are in their 70s and 80s, I wish that they had written something when they were young so that we could have had a snapshot of what it was like for them before they got famous and before they, were able to, buy a house and go to the Grammys and do whatever it is. I just mentioned the Grammys because they're today in LA. But, I think if you can write about it while you're in it, there's something a little bit more powerful there. That's sort of like, look, I'm with you. I don't claim to be some sort of, jazz historian or authority on anything. And I've certainly not achieved a lot of the stuff I want to achieve yet, but I think that makes it relatable,
And you're now kind of passing on these stories to the next generation, but what was the best advice that you've ever received about having a life and having a career in music?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where this came from, but I read it somewhere, is that you just can't worry about what anyone else is doing, ever. Because if you compare yourself, you said the back shop and the front shop. If you compare yourself, you'll take the wind out of your sails, totally. And I just think, the more, it's great to have a community around you. It's great to go explore the world of art, both on the internet and in real life. But, if you worry about what other people are doing too much, you just are, losing valuable time and attention that you could be giving to yourself. So I just think that you can't worry about what's going on around you at all, even close to as much as you doing your own thing.
And is there an online resource or a tool like Evernote or something that you absolutely love?
I just make notes in my phone. I use my voice memos all the time. I use a little note taker. I think it's just called Reminders, and I make a lot of notes in that, and I sync them to my email so that if my phone goes off a cliff, I still have them. And I just organize my email very efficiently. I have a folder for everything I'm doing. I've got a book folder, an album folder, a folder for, creative emails. Like I subscribe to, of course, your stuff and a lot of other people. And so I've got like an email for, inspiring newsletters, and I've got an email folder for violin articles. And so I try to keep my email very organized so that when I open it up, I'm not having, a meltdown. And I just think that can definitely help. Just simplifying your email is great.
And it's something I've noticed. I've had the good opportunity to meet with some of other kind of young alumni from Thornton School of Music and some of those other music schools. And the thing that's constantly impressed me is how together a lot of them are. If you compare them to previous...
I'm not sure about that.
But I would say if you compare them to a lot of previous generations where they've been able to... Maybe because, say within jazz, the jazz industry was in better health, let's put it that way. And so it was easier to maybe get work and to do things. But it seems to be a lot of those younger players coming through, well, for start technically, I would say they're much sharper than maybe previous generations because they have video and they have things now that the previous generation didn't have. But also they seem to be a little bit more on it a lot of the time, a little bit more together.
People my age who are born in the 90s or maybe the late 80s even, I think we've come up at a time when people in music school and just people all over the internet, even if you don't go to music school, it doesn't matter, but we know very well that the music industry sort of doesn't exist anymore as it used to. And we never saw it exist because we're too late for that. So we don't really have this oh, the good old days thing, because we just, we
Yeah.
just came up in this time where it's like, okay, well, nobody's buying any albums. You can put your music on Spotify and they'll send you 5 cents a month, and then, whatever. And it's just, we've all sort of, I think, taken matters into our own hands a little bit, because we realize how competitive it is. We realize that people aren't making as much money on tour. We realize that, music can be downloaded in an instant for free, because we all do that also. So I think there's a little bit of an advantage for us because we've grown up in this time, which is why, crowdfunding and Patreon and all these other websites and different things have become so popular, I think, is because young people are saying, okay, well, if I don't do this myself, there is no way anybody else can. And I'm not willing to give up my dream. Therefore, I've got to get the hell to work.
And do you think jazz artists, that young jazz artists, have any advantage maybe to folks who are maybe more in the pop or the EDM scenes or other scenes? Because it seems like the jazz side, maybe things like bluegrass are similar, and there's other styles that are more, they're considered more maybe live art forms than necessarily recorded art forms. So do you feel that you have an advantage over some of your peer group?
Not really, because I think that every musical style and every art form, period, has its own challenges. I don't think that, definitely there's a challenge in jazz. Okay, how am I going to get young people to listen to this? That's like a major challenge, But then in EDM, it's, okay, there are 50 million DJs. So how are you ever going to stand out? And so I think everybody has their own issues to overcome. But it is great that classical music, bluegrass, you mentioned, jazz, and a few other genres are still the best heard live, which is not the case for a lot of the rock and pop and country and dance music and other stuff that's coming out now. At least I know. One thing that really makes me feel good is that I know I'm heard my best live. And, if I was somebody else, not going to name names, but if I was somebody else that made albums that had a lot of sort of doctoring and production and just, had to be edited and reworked a lot to sound the right way, maybe I wouldn't feel so confident playing live. But I do enjoy playing live more than anything else. So that at least is on my side.
And as we're on the subject of recorded music, if you could recommend just one record and also one book to our listeners, what would they be?
Well, one record. Well, here we go. I guess I'm going to, only one? Oh, no.
Only one.
Oh, this is so terrible. Okay, maybe I'll do, let's do Jamison Ross. Jamison Ross is the drummer on my new album, and he is at the Grammys today because he decided a couple years ago, after being a great first call jazz drummer around the world for everybody, he decided that he wanted to sing, and so he started writing songs and singing. So now his show consists of him sitting in the middle of the stage in the front. He plays drums and sings. And on his first jazz vocal album, now he's been nominated for a Grammy, so that's where he is today. And I'm just so proud of him, and I think he's one of the best singers in the world. So you've got to check out Jamison Ross, and his album is called Jamison. So there's that. And the book I would mention is a great book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And it's a wonderful book about how to keep your mind in the present moment and to not fear the future. That was very, very helpful for me. So
let's now, as we finish up, imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So
oh, God.
You've got the tools of your trade, you've got your violin and the skills and the abilities that you've acquired over the years as a musician, but you know no one and no one knows you. How would you restart things?
Well, one thing I probably wouldn't do is go to music school, to be honest.
And why do you say that?
Well, just because I think... You said I do know what I know now, right?
Yeah.
When I start over. Yeah, so I know now that music school can be a great place to meet people, but also, what's even better is just going to gigs and meeting people that way. And then you save yourself a lot of money. And I also think the biggest thing you save yourself if you don't go to music school that a lot of people struggle with is basically having your personal style sort of, for a while, is kind of put on hold because you're at school and you have all these different professors who think they know everything, who are basically trying to mold you. And by the way, there are some exceptions to this. I'm just sort of talking about, in general, a lot of people struggle with this. You know, you've got your dreams, you've got your style, you've got the things you want to do, and then you've got these people in school who basically are saying, well, that's all fine and good, but now you're going to do what I say. And then you get that 5 days a week for a few years, and then sometimes people come out of school and they can't even remember who they are anymore because all they've been doing is checking other people's boxes. So I think one great way, if I wanted to start over, I would probably just start going to other people's gigs and just asking to sit in, and then just save myself the 4 years of being broken down and, you know, let's shave this corner and shave that corner and shave this thing. And it's like, well, you know, what the hell happened to my corners, you know?
And which city would you be in? I mean, you're in LA now, but I know you've played a lot in New York and in London, and you've been in Italy and other places. So where would, if you had to restart, which city would you restart in?
I might actually go to London. I mean, LA is a fine place. You can find a lot of different kinds of musicians here. New York would be good, but if you're starting out, it might be a little bit scary. I might go to London because I like the audiences there. They're a little bit shy, but at least they're very forgiving and generous. And there's a lot of young people there, and obviously the influence of European jazz is a lot more prevalent there than in America. So I'd probably go to London, I'd just go there and I'd sit in. It's
an interesting time, London, just now, because you're getting so many players coming from other parts of the world that are using London as the hub, really. And so in one night, you're probably going to play with players from certainly all other parts of Europe, if not all other parts of the world. So it's an interesting time. So Nora, it's fantastic having you on the show. What is the name of the new album? We're going to put the link on the show. I realize it's not out just yet, but I'm going to put the links to your website and everything. But do you have a name for the new album and the book?
I'm sorry to say I actually don't, and I have been. You have no idea. I have been struggling for months to come up with something, and this has happened to me 3 or 4 times. It's like 3 a.m. and I'm sleeping, and it comes to me, and I rush down the stairs in my pajamas, and my roommates are downstairs doing whatever, writing songs or doing whatever they're doing, and I say, you guys, I've got it, and I tell them, and they're like, that's horrible, and I'm like, what? And I've done this so many times, and so if anybody has any ideas for me,
okay, so
feel free to email them over.
So and let everyone know what's the best way to connect with you. Give your details so people can check out what's happening and give those suggestions if they've got them.
Yeah, so I've got a YouTube channel. You can just type in Nora Germain into YouTube, and I also have a Facebook page. It's also under Nora Germain. And then my website is also just my name, noragermain.com. So if you'd like to, you could send me a message on Facebook, or, you know, you can just comment on one of my pictures and tell me you've got an album idea. Maybe I'll post something about it. I'll say I'm now taking submissions, and we'll see what comes in. But
do an online poll as well. And
yes.
We'll put all these notes on the show notes. People go to jamestaylor.me, and we'll have all the links here, including the favorite album and book as well. So Nora, I wish you all the best with the new album and the book.
Thank you so much.
Getting it, and I wish you all the best with your career as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a really, really nice time talking to you.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.